It's time for the Subvert with holistic counseling psychologist Kristin Rumohr.
Hello.
Professional constructor of things Aaron Stewart.
Hello.
And producer of all things audio-visual Alex Knight. Hey, that's
and
me.
Cassius.
Thanks for letting us into your world as we debate and educate on a smattering of different subject material handpicked just for you. So consider your thought processes reconstructed. If you don't think they're reconstructed yet, they will be by this end. By the time of this episode ends, maybe I should have another drink so I can speak properly.
Yes.
Always a good idea.
Absolutely.
Yes.
More drinks.
Today's episode is on cancel culture.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah.
This is going to be loads of fun. We really look forward to where we're going to go with this, and we're happy that you decided to join us on this inaugural episode.
Yeah. All right, so let's explain what cancel culture is about before we dive into this conversation. You know, each of you have some talking points here that we're going to get to here, but let's actually
I wrote them on my hand.
Yeah, I know you did. Let's actually define what cancel culture is. So cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for public figures and companies after they have done or said something
Well, that is a
considered
question. Is it a
objectionable
popular
or offensive.
Is it a popular method?
It is a popular method. Or is it?
Yeah, that's a question, right? I mean,
Right.
It is a method, but whether it's a popular one, I don't know.
Exactly. Cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming. So the first thing that we're going to get to here is historical accounts of censorship. And I've got a couple of points here that I wanted to
Galileo?
go over.
Are we going back to Aristotle or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not
I mean-
going to go
Well, I mean,
that
it goes
far.
Realistically, yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
realistically, right?
We only have an hour to talk about this, so otherwise we'd be here all day if we were going to go back.
So a
that
gentle
far.
skimming over, but
a skiffing of history.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of examples here. I want to talk about the firing of James Gunn, who is a director for Disney, was set to direct the third installment of Guardians of the Galaxy. This is a bit old news. I think this is about a year old, but this was a good example, I thought, of something to bring up for this, because we got to play a little bit of devil's advocate at some point and talk about what are the pros and cons of somebody losing their entire livelihood because of something that they said 10 years ago. So with James Gunn on Twitter, he put out a bunch of tweets, and this happened over a course of several years, from 2008 to 2011. In one tweet, he wrote, the best thing about being raped is when you're done being raped and it's like, phew, this feels great not being raped. So that's one example. And then in another, he joked that attending a meeting of the North American Man-Boy Love Association made him feel okay for being who he was. And so Disney just immediately fired him after this.
Well, not immediately. I mean, these resurfaced 10 years later.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
not-
okay. So they I should say they fired him once they discovered these old tweets. So that's
Well, and that's the thing. Like, it wasn't even them that discovered it. It was some person on Twitter that flagged them or sent some sort of
Oh,
message.
is that what it
wasn't
was?
Is
Okay.
that? I assume that's how that works, right?
Well, that's probably what
I
it
doubt
was.
Disney is going through James Gunn's tweets from 10 years ago and going, hey, wait a minute, right? It was some person on Twitter that took offense to it and started some campaign or something that made its way to Disney.
That's
Right?
probably
Like,
what it was.
Yeah, realistically. Right. Again, I doubt that Disney has anybody that really gives two shits about tweets from 10 years ago. But if somebody in the public starts a Twitter campaign that, right. And that's my issue with this. It's not necessarily a popular thing, right? It's more just a populist kind of thing, right? Where you're deciding that it's popular, whether it's popular for the rest of humanity or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, and who decides what's popular? Who decides
Or
what
who gets
is
canceled. Yeah.
Well, of course, yeah, and who decides what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and that's kind of what we're talking about, of going back into history of this has been a widespread thing of who's deciding this, and it's usually whoever's in power at the time is this is right, this is wrong, and it's now culminated in this culture because of social media and everything else that it's a bit more widespread. So is it wrong then to have something that you've said 10 years ago suddenly come out because maybe the social agenda has changed, the moral agenda has changed, depending on whoever's in power. And all of a sudden, what you've said back in the day now can affect you in your present.
And that's where it goes. I mean, who hasn't said something stupid 10 years ago? If you haven't, then you probably haven't been speaking. You were probably in some sort of coma or something. That's the only way that you haven't said something that 10 years ago somebody went, yeah, that's cool. And now everybody is going, no, that's not cool anymore. Right? Like we've all done stuff that was totally acceptable at the time because that's what everybody else was doing. Right? And we don't do that anymore. And unless you were, implicitly told that we don't do that anymore, you're not really going to know. Right? So a lot of this comes down to mostly just ignorance as far as I'm concerned. Right? We've said some shit in the past that we need to, have a reconciling with, but I don't know that necessarily canceling someone and not allowing them the platform to be able to reconcile themselves is the way to do this. So that's my take.
Yeah, I mean, I think it very much depends, obviously, on what you say. Obviously, and I'm going to get to some terrible examples. Obviously, the Me Too movement comes to mind, but I guess brands have a certain persona that they need to upkeep, right? So obviously, Disney is traditionally known as a family company. I would say that's pretty fair statement to make about Disney. So the question is, should you be held accountable for something that you said in your own personal time outside of the workspace? Because it seems obviously that's the way things are going now.
And
that
again,
you can
I
lose
just
your job
go,
for
if that was the case, we would all be out of work, right? I mean, realistically.
Yeah.
Well, and where does the line get drawn, right?
And that's exactly
you
right?
look at, kind of job postings now where it's your social media and your personal life does affect your work life.
Yeah.
And is that fair?
And it's comedians getting, attacked for saying things in a comedy routine. And I go, but wait a minute, we know that that's supposed to be kind of a separate, insulated space where they can say these things that are, supposed to be taboo or supposed to be just those kind of thoughts that you don't speak out loud, right? And we're holding them at fault for saying these things. Well, it's kind of the same thing as far as I'm concerned, where I would rather get these thoughts out so that we understand where you're coming from so that we can say, whoa, okay, right? Like, I get that, but we don't do that anymore, right? I feel that we're limiting our conversation with this whole canceling thing, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being able to actually hear both sides, we're just canceling it. And I think that's part of the problem of why we have these, echo chambers and just, partisanship everywhere and nobody's able to talk to each other. And I think that's what we want to try to break through with this whole thing here is how do we get to the meeting ground between? How do we find that spot where we can actually talk to each other about these things without it being just a black and white, I'm right, you're wrong conversation,
And the question is, why has it become so intense?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how has it gotten to the point of cancel culture? At what point did we lose the ability to reason and listen to each other, right?
That is the $1 million question.
Why is it wrong to have a thought, right? We've all had it. And we've had something pop in, you go, oh, where did that come from? Right? And it's kind of wrong, but unless you can have a platform in which
really
you
wrong.
can speak it out loud, right? And have some feedback on it and have a genuine conversation as to, okay, well, Kristin, this is why this is wrong.
Exactly.
Right? Then you're never going to reconcile that and you're going to constantly keep kind of believing the same thing. And whether that's, a wrong belief or not is, I guess, yet to be determined. But, if you don't have a platform to air that out, then you're just going to keep it inside. And then what happens then? Well, it's just going to fester.
Yeah.
It's going to become more intense. And then we end up with this polarization, which is what I believe is kind of what cancel culture's come to. It's an extreme polarization, right? We've lost the middle ground.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely extreme. I mean, that's kind of my problem with it too, is that we've gone so far one way. I feel like we need to, and rope it back a bit, because I don't think I want to live in a world where people just lose a job and can never be, they're unhireable because of something that they said on Twitter in this example, like James Gunn, with him. I mean, again, this is old news. Disney's rehired him. He's doing the next movie.
And that's my other problem, is that there was this big outrage and then it kind of dwindled away and then we're back to what we were doing. Wait, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
But weren't we supposed to have
But you made
canceled-
such a
Right.
big
So you mean-
thing
yeah,
about it.
like
that
so
it
you mean
was-
it's fixed now? Was that what this was all about? It's now fixed and we can go back to what we were doing? Like,
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Okay. Well, let's get to another example here. Perhaps this one is a little bit worse, but I don't know. You guys tell me what you think here. So Sasha White is a New York literary agent, and she was fired following remarks following remarks where she retweeted on her personal account about transgender people and domestic violence. She retweeted a comment on social media that read, "Trans women being vulnerable to male violence does not make you women." So she didn't say that, but she retweeted it, which is basically a quote. You're quoting somebody. So do you think that somebody in this example, like with her losing a job because of a retweet, is that going too far one way?
Well, I mean, if she retweeted it with a, "I agree with this completely," thumbs up, right? I mean,
Right.
that's one thing, right? But I mean, if it was just, retweeting this, hoping to start up a conversation around it, I mean, again, I kind of feel like that's the part that we lose here is that conversation. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for equality and trans rights, and I definitely think at the very least in the workspace, obviously everyone should be treated the same. But I mean, this was something that she retweeted. I mean, okay, fine, you can take it as an endorsement of what that person said. Maybe that's her own personal belief. I would have to assume that she obviously believes that if she retweeted it. Otherwise, why would you do something like that? But I still feel like there should be some level of free speech. Like, I don't have to like what you say, right?
Yep.
I think it would be very different if she confronted somebody like a coworker and said some just outwardly terrible comment about somebody that was trans. Then that would be different. But that's not what was said here. So as much as maybe an endorsement of that tweet is reprehensible, I still don't think that
I even
warrants
kind of
somebody
argue
losing
that
their
point,
job.
right? Because it's not a new thing to share something that's potentially provocative,
Sure.
right? Whether
No,
it's,
not at all.
in this case, it's words or a thought or art, and words are essentially a different form of art. So by sharing something by, "Hey, I think this is controversial," it's kind of what Aaron said, is it's inviting a conversation. And to not even have that conversation, I think we're doing everybody a disservice. The human race, we're doing a disservice. Is we're just labeling straight away to be like, no, whatever that is, it's absolutely wrong. Right? And no one can question why it's wrong. We can't talk about why it's wrong. It's just wrong. And you're a horrible human being if you believe this or like this or whatever it is. So I think everyone's entitled to be able to share whatever they think, whatever they like. Right?
Well, as you mentioned, then the problem is, where's the goalpost, right? Like, so this was the line here, and now next week the line is there. Oh, okay, so we can't say that. Okay, but now next week the line is here now. Oh, okay, I guess where exactly do we draw this line? And why is there, if there's no way of drawing an immutable line in the sand, that's the line, then why are we even bothering with it instead of just allowing people to say what they think and just dealing with that? I get that it's harder, right? Because then you actually, have to deal with it.
Well,
but it needs to be done. That's the problem that we have, is that we don't give each other. I feel that what we're doing is limiting each other, right? In that I don't believe that you have the capacity to change or that you have the capacity to reason, which doesn't help this conversation.
No,
it basically
it
just
certainly
implies
doesn't.
that we're all too stupid
Well, this is
to
part
be
of-
able to talk to each other or to be able to deal with each other as human beings. And I don't think that's where we're supposed to be right now. I think that we're supposed to be finding that middle ground of, hey, you've got these weird ideas. I've got weird ideas too. Ah! Right? Like, if you knew what was going on inside here, I tell you, man.
Yeah.
Right? And finding those common grounds of, I'm fucked up too. Right? How do we be less fucked up together? Right?
Yeah, I mean, just look at what's happening with politics, particularly down south or with our American friends. Like, the country could not be more divided right now. And
I think it
what
could
use? Well, I mean, that's scary.
You say that, but
That's
you know
scary.
they haven't quite hit the Civil
It's a
War
scary thought.
phase of things
But-
yet. But
Well,
yeah.
everything what you're saying is I totally agree. We seem to be incapable, or at least unwilling, to have conversations with people that don't align with our beliefs. Whether it doesn't matter
Yeah.
what side you're on.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to stay in this silo, in this bubble.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a big cognitive bias. Obviously plays a big part in the way we handle ourselves. But like what it just seems like whatever happened to just listening to people.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
And so here was a study that I actually read about just a little while ago where they were talking about
I was really hoping we were going to have some kind of study in this.
well,
So we
you know,
sound smart.
It was essentially they just talked about the different, say, media outlets that people consume. Okay? And so what they found was that conservatives tend to consume conservative media. And in general, only conservative media. They don't look at any other opinions, whereas Democrats tend to look at kind of the you know, they look at a little bit of the conservative media. They look at some of the Democratic media. They're kind of looking at both. So if you're looking at people who aren't even interested in looking outside of their bubble, the question is, how do we get to these people? How do we talk to how do we have that conversation of, you can leave your bubble. It's okay. You can just have these outside thoughts. It's totally fine, right? Like, the issue, I think, is that we get so ingrained in, this is what I believe, and I have to have that as my identity, or else the group will disown me.
Right.
I think also
Right.
in kind of like in modern society as well, and just social media is the prime example, that feeling of inclusiveness and how the algorithms are actually written is to
Exactly.
present to you information that is already in alignment with
Yeah.
your cognitive bias.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very easy to kind of get sucked into this and to go along with the majority or what you think is the majority. And this is how things like censorship and cancel culture actually take off, is because you think that everyone else feels the same because that is the information you're presented with.
Exactly.
Right. But it's not like, oh, just in your neighborhood, you feel everyone feels the same way. You have this kind of flawed idea that everybody feels this way because you've presented with thousands of complete strangers, let's say on social media, that are reflecting your personal biases.
Well,
So
then you get
it
to the
just
worst
kind
part
of-
of that, where it's the continuation of people should feel the same way.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that's where things become a real issue. When you're looking at people on the other side of the world and saying they should all feel the same way. I think that's where we're starting to have this real failing of thoughts, and it's okay for everybody to have their own way of doing things. It's okay. It's all right. It's okay.
And when you have kind of immediacy culture, which is arguably what we have now, right? There's instant gratification. You want something,
Absolutely.
you want it now. So if you perceive something to be morally wrong, you want instant reprimanding. Instant. And that's kind of what canceling is now, right? And it's hop on. Oh, someone said something bad. Okay, everyone's on board with this. What do? Cut them out.
Yeah. And now, so going back into the study end of things, I had also read a bit where, in general, like, to go on the positive end of cancel culture, right? The people who are essentially having a voice now and are actually being able to cancel people are the people who did not have any way of voicing these problems beforehand, right? You look at Epstein, you look at all these people that in power who people were trying to cancel for years, were trying to say, hey man, he fucking raped me. Right. And nobody would listen. And all these, racism, just all this shit that's been happening that nobody had any way of actually, voicing. Right. Other than, trying to do protests. And well, we've shown that doesn't really seem to help things much now, does it? Hey, guys. I mean, you take to the streets and you would think that would make some sort of systemic change. And yet we're now seeing a doubling down on the bullshit. Right. And now we're having, Trump just pushing this just blatant, just fallacious bullshit. And if you're never seeing the outside of that bubble, how are you ever supposed to know? Right. And it's just, again, how do we talk to these people if they're not interested in getting into the bubble?
Yeah. You guys touched on a good point, which I think this sort of dovetails into the next thing I want to talk about, was how social media has an impact on all of this stuff. Because I think some people might be under, maybe not, but I feel like some people might be under the impression that cancel culture is a new thing. Now, that term might be new.
Yeah, the term's new.
But I pulled this quote here that I thought was really great about cancel culture not being a new thing. And they said, what we're seeing described as cancel culture isn't so much a new kind of behavior, but a new set of actors in our political discourse who get to say what isn't okay. Okay? Young people, African Americans, transgender people. Okay? They now have the power to have their voices heard. Everyone thinks there are lines. The question is, where are those lines and who gets to draw them?
Which is an interesting point as well, because when it comes down to, at the end of the day, it's power, right?
Yeah.
Whoever has power kind of controls the popular thought.
Yeah.
So if it's now a group of people that previously had none, then there's going to be a transitional period, right? When power is new to you, what do? Most people are going to go a little bit crazy with it, right? The pendulum's always going to swing too far one way until it eventually settles back in. So just to kind of play devil's advocate on it as well, right? Like, is that a bad thing at the end of the day to have previously kind of marginalized groups that are now setting the actual moral standard for what's right and wrong?
And that's the thing. I think we definitely need in society to have a mechanism of being able to cancel things, right? Flat Earth. Why are we not canceling that? Why are we still allowing that to happen? Why are we allowing people to believe that the Earth is fucking flat?
Free speech.
What
though.
fucking sense does that? Yeah, but again, like, there's a difference between, having an opinion about things, about like whether you like mayo, and an opinion about whether the Earth is flat. They're two completely different things.
I argue
right?
you're allowed to think whatever you want.
I know.
So if you think you genuinely believe the Earth is flat, then I mean, power to you. You're not hurting me.
I can still think that those people are absolutely insane and stupid, but yeah, you have the right to say. But that is the question, though, because you're either for free speech and it's in the very definition of like unencumbered free speech, or you aren't, right? Like, this is where, like, again, with social media and to play devil's advocate, is the internet a bad thing? Or isn't it? To me,
our use of it is bad.
The internet, to me, like, because you see this all the time where people are clamoring for, like, oh, okay, we need to start regulating these social media company platforms. Facebook needs to be treated like a utility. It needs to be regulated. I was like, okay, well, what does that look like if we do? Right? How does that change the platform?
Well, I think that's a slippery slope, because then if you're regulating it, you're essentially regulating free speech, because social media was invented for that, as an outlet for you
but these private companies, they have the ability to say who they want to allow on their platform as well, too. I mean, look at Alex Jones, right? I mean, he's a loudmouth, far extreme, like, person who's been banned off of YouTube, banned off of Facebook, banned off of Twitter, banned off of all these platforms. Now, he still has his own platform. He has a website. So if you believe in whatever he's selling, you can go there and pay his whatever he charges for a subscription and watch what he has to say. And that makes a lot of people angry. A lot of people are saying, well, that's just censorship. And I argue, no, that's not censorship. It's a private platform.
Yeah.
That's you're playing in their playground with their rules. If you don't like what they have to say, if you don't like how they operate, go somewhere else. This is the beauty, actually, of the open web as a concept. I can have my own platform. I can have my own website. I can do whatever I want on my own website within, obviously, there are legal extremes here, but I can say whatever I want on my own platform and nobody can shut me down, in theory. That's how the web should operate, right? So Alex Jones is doing that just fine. So to complain that, his posts or his accounts are being taken down, well, there are legitimate reasons for these platforms to be taking this information down, because a lot of what he said is flat out misinformation. Like saying Sandy Hook was staged by actors. It's just preposterous. There are people dying. There are people in body bags.
I mean, the frogs are definitely turning gay, but
yeah, I don't know about that. But yeah, I believe in like the open web. I believe that you should be able to say what you want on your own platforms. But when it comes to private platforms, I'm sorry, like you're playing by their rules. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. Start your own platform if you don't like it.
Which is an interesting point, because if you think, pre-internet age, if anyone can remember that. Ooh.
Yeah, long time ago.
Yeah. So if you wanted to go and protest and you wanted to stand on your soapbox in the middle of, the town square and say your piece, that's perfectly fine. Now, if you wanted to protest, let's say Parliament, and you're doing it in front of the Parliament building, well, what's going to happen? You're going to get arrested. You're going to get pulled away. But if you stand wherever else on your own piece of land, then no one can actually, or shouldn't be able to, in my opinion, censor whatever it is you have to say if you are on your own personal land, which is kind of what you're saying. If you have your own personal web address, you can say whatever you want. No one should be able to police that, in my opinion. But if you're going to be on someone else's domain, then I guess you need to respect their domain. This is just for argument's sake. This doesn't necessarily...
Yeah, and then again, in terms of argument's sake, I mean, so where again is the line? In terms of policing, like if you're saying things like, I'm going to kill all Muslims, or I'm going to start... Right?
Well, that's a threat.
That's the thing. Like, that's the question, right? Like, but at what point are, say, slurs considered threats?
Yeah.
Right? Like at what point is slander considered a threat? Right? At what point, again, it's a lot of these things.
The thing is,
there are context, of course, right?
But that's right. So that's a matter of like, again, where are we drawing this line? Is it just saying these things, or is it doing things? Is it right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the, it's a very simple question, of course, that we've grasped onto today. And we're luckily going to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes here and have a clear answer for everybody as to how we can move this forward, and where exactly the line is, where we can cancel things and where we cannot cancel things. But again, I think it's just a matter of, the problem is that a lot of this comes down to shame, I think, and guilt, in that you have these thoughts inside our head, and if you happen to say them, we get this feeling of, oh God, they're all gonna judge me, right? And I go, but we all have these thoughts, so where would the judgment be, right? Like if you've had just as silly thoughts inside your head as anyone else, why would we be shaming someone else for having almost the, but just a little bit different, but not the same thought, but a little bit different, right? I mean,
yeah. What do you think of removing statues? That are, statues of
where are we putting them?
Right. So there's obviously there have been a lot of movements about taking down certain statues. Where people that represent a part of our history that have a checkered past, that have done things that maybe they supported slavery in general. Like, how do you feel about removing those statues, all those icons?
The thing is that people were acting...
It feels like burying history to me. Like,
well, exactly.
How do we learn about
cutting
past
out
mistakes if we, for example, just decided to burn every single book about World War II? Let's just burn every documentary. Let's burn every page in every book about World War II.
That's
because
like
we don't want to talk about
Attila
Nazis.
the Hun to the same social norms that we have today. Right? Like it's like holding Genghis Khan to the same, right? Like it just doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't.
Right?
I mean,
They
at the
lived in
time
a
people
completely
existed.
Exactly.
These things were acceptable. I mean, we don't agree with it now necessarily, but back then it was just normal practice. So I think it's very harmful to be like, no, just cut it out, pretend it didn't exist, burn it. And you're right. I mean, what does that teach future generations about our history? How do you learn about where our morality came from? It actually just skews it in a more harmful direction, in my opinion. Whereas, I mean, it's one thing to, place them in, say, like a museum type setting, right? Where you can go and kind of learn about it and be like, okay, well, this person existed. They did some things. We don't agree with them now.
Yes.
But this is part of where we came from. We have evolved.
Right.
And that is how we evolve, is by talking about the mistakes that we've made.
That's true. But also, and I'll use this as an example, but this was maybe a year or two, maybe it's been a couple of years, but since some radio stations decided that they wanted to ban the Christmas song, Baby It's Cold Outside, because it sounds kind of rapey.
Yeah.
But it's like, and I understand. On the other hand, I'm conflicted because look at language, okay? Language has to evolve over time. There's certain words that we just don't say anymore, okay? And I'm fine with that. I think things do need to evolve, but also, you know, like you guys said, it's not exactly fair to take something that was created 50, 60 years ago and put it through a modern lens, because it's like, well, it was a different era back then. People thought differently. People wrote songs differently. Like, people did a lot of different things. Now, I'm not saying it's right.
Well, and that's the thing, is that none of these people were saints. None of us are saints, right? And so the idea that, you know, we removed this statue of this person who never did anything wrong. What? That doesn't, like, is this a statue of some, like, God king or something that we've put up now? Or is this some dude that we decided to honor, and now we've decided that, you know, maybe the stuff that he did, we can honor a different way by putting him into a museum where we can actually have the context of what happened, right? And say that this person did some things that were very honorable, and they did some things that we consider now today to be not quite so honorable, and we've grown from, and this is the context of it. That's the problem, is that a lot of these, you know, statues were put up in the context of the Jim Crow era and were meant to oppress black people. That's what they were put up for. It was specifically done to hold them down. And for the black people to now say, hey, we want to have some reconciliation around this, is absolutely within their right? Just like if we were putting up statues of, you know, just our, you know, people that we wanted to use as our symbol of oppressing, say, I don't know, the indigenous native people of Canada.
Yeah.
Right? If we were to do something like that, it would be absolutely their right to stand up and say, hey, man, this statue that you erected on our land, right? We don't agree with that. Right. And I just, you know, and again, like, to remove that statue, I don't think is necessarily the right answer, but we need to have those things put into some sort of context.
Absolutely.
So we put them into a museum, we put them into the history books, we put them into some place where we can actually still have that conversation around these things, so that we don't, you know, lose sight of the fact that these people were humans, flawed, but still human, just like the rest of us, right? And they were dealing with the best information they had at the time.
Yeah. Kristin, I want you to speak on this point, because we had written this down in the notes here. Impacts on personal identity formation. What did you mean by that?
I think it's, you know, when your thoughts are formed by the overwhelming kind of morals and standards of your community at the time, right? So during your upbringing and everything else, sorry, I'm just gathering my own thoughts while I speak about this. So the standards of the community, right, are then imposed upon you. So your personal identity is going to be wrapped up in whatever the norm is at the time. Sorry, that took a while to get there.
No, I see where you're going
to get
with
back
this.
to kind of, you know, the topic of cancel culture. So if you're growing up within this, right? So you're going to grow up then thinking it's an okay thing to just shut other people down.
These are the things that we cancel in this culture.
It is. And let's say from like a developing child's mind, growing up in this, it's okay. You just shut people down. They say something you don't like or you don't agree with. Well, you can just cut them out. You can publicly shame them. You don't have to worry about it. And then you can feel like a hero about it because other people are going to hop on board. So what impacts would that potentially have on them as adults further in life, right? How are you going to go forth into the world if that is now your core belief?
Yeah. If you've been a hero for defending these beliefs all your life, why would anybody telling you different change your mind? Right? If your grandma, when you were 5 years old, commended you for standing up to that black person, right? Why would you consider that to be the wrong thing? Right? Like, at what point are you going to be like, no, grandma, we don't do that anymore, right? Like, unless you actually grow up and find a different group that indoctrinates you into their cancel culture and says, no, that thing that you were doing, that's what we cancel.
Yeah.
Right? You're never going to have that conversation. You're always going to consider that to be the norm.
That's what we've been talking about, is that everybody is entitled to different thoughts. Everyone has different thoughts because of where they grew up, what they were presented with, what information they had that was said was right, what was wrong, creates different opinions. We're going to think differently. And it's okay to voice that. It's okay. And it should be encouraged to say, instead of, oh, you're an idiot for thinking this way, it's, oh, you think differently than I do. How interesting. Tell me why you think that.
See, and I like to look at it as, oh, you're kind of an idiot for thinking that. Hey, I'm an idiot too. Hey, wow, crazy, right? Like, I think that we need to have us on the same plane. And that's the thing, right? Like I've had all sorts of stupid thoughts inside my head. I'm kind of, right? Like
You don't say.
I call myself the smartest stupid person you'll ever meet, right? Or the stupidest smart person, right? Because as smart as I consider myself to be, I'm a real dumbass at times. Right? Just like we all are. Einstein made all sorts of dumb, stupid shit that he did, right? Like, that's the thing. The smartest of us can be really stupid. The dumbest of us can be very smart. Right? And that's one thing that a lot of people seem to forget, is that the dumb people, a lot of times they cut through a lot of the bullshit. Right?
Well, and what's a measure of intelligence?
Yeah. But that's the thing.
Right?
Like, so that's where those flashes of brilliance can come out of anywhere. Right? And you don't have to be necessarily smart or not smart for these things to be true.
Well, and it's funny because it's what we would label as being, simple.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly,
just being observant, right?
And
that person's
yes,
simple-minded,
exactly.
when it's just, you're right, cutting through the bullshit and saying,
And simple is great.
I'm just observing
sometimes.
this.
Yeah.
Right?
Sometimes we need that simple. Sometimes we need to just cut out all that bullshit and just be like, nope, that's the point.
Well, and you need a foundation to build on, right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone's trying to be like, oh, we're at the top of this pyramid of, intelligence or greatness or whatever it is. But they're forgetting about the foundation, which is just being simple and observational. There we go.
So what are the, with respect to cancel culture, what are the impacts on humanity and our collective consciousness?
I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? Is
I think it's a
especially
pendulum. It just swings. We're just going to be swinging back and forth, and sometimes we smack stuff out of the way. Sometimes,
well, I think the interesting point, and
What an eloquent, how eloquent.
I'm just trying to make it simple. Just trying to cut through the stupid.
Get out of here. I think we're at an unprecedented point, just because of how connected the world is now. Whereas before, in terms of, human consciousness, it would be very dependent upon kind of your geographical location.
Absolutely.
And now it's everywhere, right? So we're shaming people that are from a completely different part of the globe and assuming that we all need to think the same way. So what are the impacts for that? Is that a good thing potentially to standardize human beings? Should there be one singular way of thinking across the globe? Could that do more harm or good? I mean, that's yet to be seen, I suppose.
I think that would definitely do more harm than good. Having one singular, just like everybody believes this. No, I can't see that being the right.
I mean, that's not a new thought, right? You look at Catholic Church as a prime example to be like, think of all of the, millions of murders that have, been done in the name of you need to think this way.
When I kind of had that thought originally that like colonialism was kind of the original cancel culture. Right? Like that's moving into your culture and saying, no, we don't like that. We're going to wipe you out. Yeah, that was really when you get right down to it.
That's cancel culture.
Right?
Literal.
Like literally they just walked into a culture and said, fuck you guys, and we're going to wipe you out. Like,
I think, Marshall McLuhan said so many things well about just like even what the internet would actually end up being, is that it's like that term that he came up with, the global village, of like how like we're, and also how communicate, like as communication improves, like it simultaneously makes us closer together, but also farther apart in a way.
Yeah.
Because
back to your point, Kristin, like originally, if you think about it, 1,000 years ago, your sphere of influence was, 10 miles, 100 miles, maybe if you were lucky, if you actually were, considered a traveler back in the day, right? And then 100 years ago, it would have been considered, you could maybe travel 1,000 kilometers because we got cars and now you can actually hop in the car and go somewhere. And now we have full connected, right? Where you can talk to anybody on other end of the planet, wherever you want to go, everybody, right? Like even some of these, indigenous tribes that didn't have any communication with people for thousands of years are now online, right? And I think we're just going to get more and more connected. This is not the end of where we're going to go, right? Like we're actually going to, be more connected as we go with this. And so we need to really have a reconciliation of how we're doing this. Is this the best way of doing things? What are going to be the repercussions as we move forward? right? Like, do we need to, remove the money equation out of things? Is that the reason why the social media thing has gone awry, is because we allowed them to make money off of us?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's as far as I'm concerned, most of the reason why this thing has happened is because we allowed them to monetize us and take our data and our information and start making money off of us without having any thought as to what that does to make us part of the capital. I mean, granted, we were kind of already part of that, but now they're literally just making us the product, without our permission, technically. And so moving forward, if you think that Facebook is the only one or the worst of the bunch that's going to be doing this, sorry, right? The next one's going to be 10 times worse. And if you think that these guys are invasive, they'll be 10 times more invasive. And if you think that these guys are invasive, you can't imagine what it'll be 100 years from now.
Yeah.
When they actually have a chip inside our head that someone could actually, right?
How does advertising play into this, or does it at all?
Oh, yeah. Because that's where most of this money comes from, is the advertising.
Yeah.
Well, of course. And what, advertising is controlled by, again, who has the most power, i.e. money to put into advertising.
Yeah.
So the overarching morals of the person or corporation or people in power influence the ads, influence what you see, influence then what you think is important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think what we're getting to is that there are good and bad examples of cancel culture, because Twitter decided not too long ago that they were going to full stop ban all forms of political advertising on their platform, which I agree, because you have to take some accountability, as far as I'm concerned, when you get to a certain size where your platform that you're providing as a means of communication is so vast that you have to take some responsibility for potentially negative ads and how those ads influence people's decisions, right? And Facebook hasn't actually done this yet. I'm hoping that they do. They've cracked down on some ads, like the extreme ones that are very misleading, but they haven't actually outright banned them. But I guess that's the question, is like, where are political ads appropriate in any way? Should we even have political ads, period? Obviously, that's actually, we haven't even used the word propaganda, but obviously political ads are a form of propaganda. Mm-hmm. They're engineered to influence your decision making, right? Are you guys for or against banning that type of propaganda?
I don't want to ban it. I just want to see the receipts. Right? I just want to know who paid for it. Right?
That's a very good point too.
That's my I think it was George Carlin who made the point of, politicians should come with all the NASCAR logos. Right? Where you could see that ExxonMobil paid you to say that.
Right.
Oh, funny thing, hey? Oh, that's great. Oh, Monsanto made you. Oh, they paid for that gigantic logo you've got sitting on your chest right there. Oh boy, that's kind of funny how you're saying exactly the same things that they keep saying.
I definitely do not agree that companies like big corporations should have any kind of political sway. I just don't think they should have any kind of influence, and they shouldn't even be allowed to donate money, as far as I'm concerned.
But I mean, you look at even
because it's quit. Then you're playing this game of quid pro quo. Like we're going to donate X billion or millions of dollars to your campaign for the potential that maybe I want to come. Maybe I'm gonna, doing the Don Corleone, at some point I'm gonna ask you for a favor, down the road, right? So where does it end at that point?
Well, when half of their time is spent campaigning, right? If you look at what most of the senators are doing, most of their day is spent on the phone trying to gather donations.
Yeah.
Right? If in the States, as far as I know, most of their time is spent talking to these people and making those kind of quid pro quo.
Well, they also have a ridiculously long campaigning term. It's ridiculous.
Year and a half, you guys are doing this.
Nobody else does this. Nobody.
We just had one, and I was like, "Oh, that's done already." It was finished yesterday, and it was 8 weeks total.
Yeah,
and done. poof, gone. The signs came up. I saw them for about 3 days, and now it's done and over with. And it was, oh, okay, cool. And you guys won? Sweet. Right? Like, I have to beg the question of what exactly does a 1.5-year campaign cycle do for them? What exactly is the purpose of that? How does that help that political thing?
Well, for one thing,
like,
it'll make you very, very exhausted by the
But
time
that's,
it's
I just
done,
go
right?
like, what exactly, who came up with that idea?
Right.
Whose idea was it to let them for a year?
In a
and
way,
half?
it's kind of brilliant, though, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you confuse people to the point of they don't know what the fuck's going on, because it's been a 1.5 years and you're getting all these conflicting messages, and, you know, month 1, you really liked this guy, but 6 months later, you're like, oh, now I like the other guy, and you just don't know what to think.
Well, isn't that in and of itself a problem?
Yeah.
Of course
That's
it is.
problematic.
Yeah.
But
And
it
then
makes
again,
people very
right?
easy to control.
Yes,
Right? Because
yes,
then all of a sudden,
yeah.
if you can come in and be, you know, like the
What is the
proverbial,
information?
you know, white knight riding in to be like, oh, well, you're confused. Here, I can solve that for you very decisively.
But then-
and that's, again, comes back to that idea of polarization that we talked about earlier, right? So you confuse people and then you go radical on either side. And then that's where you're going to draw voters.
That's where you're going to get Trump.
Well, case in point.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
All right. On that note,
do we want to any
We've come full circle.
any other final points? I think we pretty much covered it all here.
I think that's
Solved it.
got it.
Well, I don't know about solving it.
Hooray. Well, of course we solved it. That's the whole point of this thing. What would we do this podcast for if we didn't have an answer for you at the end? I mean, we're just going to sit here and talk to you for an hour without even having an answer. So the answer is, sorry, that was supposed to go to black right there. Sorry, I'm still here, aren't I?
Yeah, you're still there.
God damn it.
Well, you're speaking to the audience. So what do you want to say to people right now, Aaron?
The answer is, you're still doing this to me.
Well,
Right.
you want to just fade to black?
Yeah,
right now?
I thought it was supposed to be the
Yeah,
answer is
no.
click. And it was
No.
supposed to just cut me off there, right? Like,
Okay.
Canceled.
Yeah.
do, do,
Canceled.
do,
Well,
do,
yeah.
do, 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 do.
Now, this podcast already has been canceled. It'll never air. In fact,
Yeah.
if only people
I
don't
think
even
that-
realize how many times we've redone this as
I do think that has to be how we end every episode. Okay, everybody, and now the answer is. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah,
now we
yeah.
have for you the answer.
right. Okay. Well, thanks for if you've tuned into this episode and you've lasted this long. Wow, I'm super impressed. Thank you very much for subscribing to the podcast. Video is available up on YouTube, and we release new episodes every single week. If you'd like to listen to the audio version only of this podcast, we are available in every podcast player of choice: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, and Stitcher. Spotify as well, if that's your cup of tea. Pretty much everywhere. Just make sure you subscribe. That'll ensure you get every single new episode dropped into your app, and then you can just listen to it anytime you like, which is what it's kind of the whole point of audio or video on demand, right?
Where do they donate
We're
the
on
money?
your schedule, not the other way around.
Where do they donate the money? That's,
Where did they donate the money?
Yeah.
I'm glad you
Where do they
asked.
get the,
hologramradio.org/donate or patreon.com/hologramradio. It all goes to the same place. Give $1 a month and
oh, I thought it was only
show your
$1,000
support.
denominations.
No, just $1 a month really does make a difference, right? If everybody does that, I think everyone could part with $1. If you can't, don't donate. If you can't, I don't want you to, not be able to put food on the table. That would suck. I don't want to be responsible for that. So
Yeah, the return on investment is not going to be great.
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure.
yeah, exactly.
Interest on those payments is going to be very, very minimal.
All right, we should tell these people where they can reach out to us because we want to ultimately hear from you.
Absolutely.
What you think, because
What do
again,
you want to talk us?
what we talked about at the beginning of the episode, this isn't one big circle jerk. We all want it. Like, if you don't agree,
not.
it's okay. We want to hear from you. So let us know. Hit us up in the comments. We're on social media on Twitter at the Subvert Pod, as well as on Facebook under the same name. Soon to be Instagram, I'm sure. You can pretty much find us everywhere. And if you prefer emailing us the old-fashioned way, it's thesubvertpod at hologramradio.org. You can send us your feedback, and we will read it out on the show. Unless you say something completely nasty, then we'll probably just delete your email.
Oh,
so
heck
you
no.
Canceled.
No. The nasty
You've been
ones we
warned.
definitely.
Oh,
will
you
read.
did. Oh, you're.
I mean, again,
you're up
we're
for
equal
that.
opportunity here, right?
Okay.
Like we're gonna read them, but
If you guys
may not,
are okay
you
with
may not
reading-
like the end result. I mean, you may like it. You never know.
It
Maybe you're
actually
that
might
kind of
be.
sadist.
It might be entertaining to
Exactly.
read the negative feedback. So we should-
Absolutely. If it's creative, I'm all for it. Right? I mean, why not?
yeah,
Let's have a discussion.
Exactly. What do you guys want us to talk about?
absolutely.
What would you like to hear?
Let us know what you want to hear. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.